Okay, gentleman further back on my right, please.
I agree with the panel about the publicity the armed forces are getting, but don't you feel that the government are failing to orchestrate publicity on a better scale and let the population of the UK know exactly why we're there? And if they did that, people would understand. It's a shame that those brave men are having to be singled out. I do feel that the government should be doing more. What does the panel think of that?
Richard North.
Publicity out of theatre is an absolute both disgrace and disaster. You talk to both the ministry, and I have done at very high level, and I've talked to ministry publicity specialists. In fact, I was asked to write a report for them on where the publicity effort was failing. And I've talked to many journalists, professional journalists, defence specialists who've been out there. Now, there's two things. First of all, publicity is a weapon in itself. The Taliban, and before that, the Iraqi insurgents were using publicity as a weapon. And we are not anything like as good at using that in the same way. For instance, the Taliban now have borrowed from the Iraqi insurgents in that the Iraqis got it down to fine art, the Iraqi insurgents, that when they blew up a vehicle, they actually had video cameras on scene. They'd picture that vehicle being blown up, and it would be on the internet within minutes, literally. We see disjointed bits of publicity, but there's no narrative, there's no storyline, there's no sense of progression that here it started, this is what we're trying to achieve, these are the way stations, and this is where we're going, and this is what we achieved. There's none of that. Now, the second point is actually an enormously important psychological point. Somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, but from memory, on the first day of the Battle of the Somme, 26,000 troops were killed. I may be wrong on the figure. Now, so far, I think it's 256 died over a period of 7 years, 2001. Yet each individual is treated as an enormous event, and not just an event. When a soldier is killed in theatre, it goes up on the MOD website and there's the announcement that a soldier has been killed or a military personnel has been killed. Hit 1. Hit 2 is when they're named. Hit 3 is when they're repatriated. Hit 4 is when they have a funeral. Hit 5 is the relatives. Each soldier, in publicity terms, dies 5 times, which means the preponderance of publicity is distorted towards death. But actually, in term, it's a very small number. And relative to any other campaign, be it Northern Ireland, be it Falklands, it is extremely small. And death is part of the job, and death is part of war.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Richard. That's going to get some reaction. Please put your hands up. Cannon, do you want to come back on that point of Richard's there, please?
I agree, and I think it's having a harmful psychological effect on the. I was talking to a mother the other day whose son is contemplating going into the army, and she was absolutely horrified by the thought. And I just try to flash back my nephew's in the army, and he went in 12 years ago or so, and I can't recall within the family, it was just a career move, and it was absolutely right for him. And obviously there was some sense of there being an element of danger, but it wasn't regarded as being a horrific thing that one just went into with huge trepidation. And that's the sort of fear, I think, that is percolating through society.
Okay, I'm going to ask Philip Stowe to come back in a minute. There was a gentleman indicating he wanted to ask a question a few moments ago, sir.
Thank you, sir. I was formulating a question a couple of minutes back when we were talking about the Ministry of Defence. And my question basically is, what is going to be the political solution of the problems in Afghanistan? And the question is probably directed to Dr. North. And I'm thinking probably about the solutions that were put in place after the Second World War, because I'm old enough to remember it. And it would seem that during the latter half of 1945, the early part of 1946, the Americans instituted the Marshall Plan, which rebuilt Europe. Now, this led to the Wunderschaft of the 1960s. Are there any parallels that we can learn? Because if the USA could do it then, why can't they do it today in Afghanistan and look upon it as the rebuilding of that country to be economically viable? And I would like to hear the views of other members of the panel, but I would think perhaps Dr. North could tell us about the Marshall Plan and how much did it cost, and the success of it.
Can you please give us a brief response to that?
As brief as I can.
Yeah.
Europe, I think, is not comparable. And very, very briefly, the problem in Afghanistan is that it isn't a country. But actually, the clue in the Marshall Plan, the Marshall Plan was a regional solution. It addressed the whole problem of the whole of Europe. I think that's where, actually, part of where we're going wrong in Afghanistan is that recently we've seen the politicians stress more that it's a AFPAC policy. So we should be addressing not just Afghanistan, but also Pakistan. I would go much further and say we also have to address India, and we also have to look at China, we have to look at the other stands, and we have to take in Iran, because the only solution, I feel, is not an Afghanistan solution. It has to be a regional solution, and yes, money in terms of a Marshall Plan would probably actually be quite a good idea if it was addressed on that regional basis.
Okay. Philip Sterling.
The issue there in Afghanistan is one that the point has been made already. It's not just a military affair, it has to be done comprehensively. And until it is done comprehensively, then the solution will be beyond our reach.